Okay, welcome to my second one. This is Hamlet Unit Day 3. This is the flipped classroom presentation. In this presentation, we're going to explore sentence pattern 1 and 2. Just get a feel of what this emulation or emulating sentence patterns, imitating sentence patterns is all about. In terms of content, we're going to be looking at Hamlet Act 1, Scene 1, Hamlet Act 1, Scene 2. A couple key questions for these scenes are comparing and contrasting these two scenes. Shakespeare shows a lot of contrast in terms of setting, mood, pace, purpose, characters involved in these two scenes. Second one is we are introduced to the most important characters of the play in Act 1, Scene 2. And so what do we learn about this? What can we infer? Stylish sentence patterns. Here it is. This is pattern number 1. Compound sentence, semicolon, no conjunction. It's a pattern that I know all of you have done before. This is simply a baseline, so we can build off of this. For example, some people dream of being something, others stay awake and are. Ha ha ha. Your assignment is to write 2 sentences connected in some way, shape, or form to our study of Hamlet that follows this pattern. Again, the idea is to craft some sentence that says something worth saying. Here's our second pattern. Not much different. All we're doing is adding a conjunctive adverb. So again, it starts with a subject verb in one independent clause. We get the semicolon, conjunctive adverb, and then the second independent clause with its own subject and verb. Be daring. Say something weird. It was radical. It was daring. Moreover, it was cheap. Notice that this example doesn't truly follow the pattern since it includes 3 independent clauses. I wonder what could be radical, daring, and cheap. So, this is just a slide to invite you to think about how Act 1, Scene 1 compares and contrasts with Act 1, Scene 2 in terms of setting, mood, and pace, purpose, in terms of topics of discussion, characters involved, relationships between those participants. Oops, this was meant to be a slide I deleted because I'm doing your homework for you, but I'm into this, so I will simply move forward. Forgive me. Outside, inside. Foreboding atmosphere, formal celebratory atmosphere. Very quick paced. Claudius's long monologues, and then Hamlet's first soliloquy. The talk of the ghost, and then also the talk of potential invasion from Norway are things that are gossiping about. However, in Act 1, Scene 2, this is official business of the state. Very formal. And then Bernardo and Marcellus and are the minor characters. They will not play a major role. But in Act 1, Scene 2, we're introduced to King Claudius, Queen Gertrude, Hamlet, Polonius, Laertes, and even Ophelia is there. Let's examine Claudius's opening monologue. This is the newly crowned King of Denmark making his first official proclamation or declaration to the court. Notice that Throughout his monologue, he uses the pronoun "are" and "we" to discuss himself. He uses this plural pronoun. It's the royal "we." It is meant many kings and queens speak about themselves as though they were synecdoche for the whole state. But in Claudius's case, this also serves a purpose because he knows, or at least suspects, that the court and the country could be very nervous, for not only are they facing a potential invasion from Norway, but the king, King Hamlet, who had ruled for so long, is now gone. So the royal "we" for reassurance. Notice he uses, so far, discretion fought with nature, showing a dichotomy of his own self. Discretion being the mind, nature, the heart, as he is trying to make himself seem human and sympathetic to his audience. As he continues on, he makes his announcement about marrying Gertrude. Notice all the alliteration, and also that after calling her his sometime sister, his queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state. This description makes it very clear that Claudius really needs to reassure his audience that Denmark is in good hands. Denmark will not be taken over. Moreover, notice Claudius's very sophisticated rhetoric, employing an antithesis, which is a combining of terms, usually opposites. With defeated joy, almost an oxymoron, with an auspicious and a dropping eye, mirth in funeral, mirth is happiness, and dearth in marriage, and dearth is sadness. In equal scale, weighing delight and dole, taken to wife. Rhetorically, he's trying to account for that his brother, the king, has died recently, and yet this is also a time to celebrate his marriage. In the next couple lines, we do notice that for the first time he references his audience specifically, and he thanks them. We're not privy to what kind of advice he has gotten from Polonius and others, but graciously he thanks his audience. Another way to endear himself. As he continues, he just talks about the threat from Fortinbras, and with those last lines in this, so much for him. We saw that the film version had Claudius rip up the letter that he had received from Fortinbras on these lines. Now these are stage direction that are not part of the manuscript or the play of Hamlet. But in this case, it seems to be a really well-supported interpretation. For Claudius, after speaking in these long sentences, ends this point with that 4-word, very succinct and powerful declaration that he will take care of young Fortinbras. Now, we're going to move on. Gertrude and Hamlet, mother and son. Remembering that this introduction to them is a very public experience. Notice that when Claudius calls over to Hamlet, he refers to him as my son, and this pains Hamlet. Now, Shakespeare is probably known as one of the greatest wordsmiths of all time, perhaps responsible for creating more original language than any other individual human. And Hamlet, perhaps, is known as Shakespeare's greatest user of language. And Hamlet's very first words in the play come as an aside. This is a stage direction, one of the few that is included in the manuscript. It's meant to be a statement that the audience can hear, but that the other characters on stage cannot. It's almost like a super duper itty bitty teeny weeny monologue or soliloquy. Hamlet, moreover, puns in his second line, I am too much in the sun, echoing Claudius's earlier talking about his son. He was saying he's too much in the spotlight of the sun, but he is too much the son, as in, King Claudius, don't call me your son. Gertrude comes in. We got to imagine that Queen Gertrude has some sensitivity to Hamlet's angst. But she says, do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. It hasn't been forever. So that hyperbole really has a biting undertone. And again, we see Hamlet picking up on the language of someone he's speaking to, taking a word and twisting it to mean something entirely different. When Gertrude says, thou know it's common that all lives must die, passing through nature to eternity, she means this happens to us all. It is a common experience. But the word common also had the connotation of being something that was considered lowly or perhaps tawdry, something that was common or base, immoral. So there's a snide comment to a tone in Hamlet's I, madame, it is common. For surely Hamlet thinks, or at least is considering, what Gertrude has done is fairly common beneath her. Then we get one of Hamlet's most famous lines from the play. It also really introduces a central motif about deception in this play. This is a play in which many characters are going to attempt overtly to deceive one another in order to gain some sort of an advantage, whether this is in the political intrigue or the personal conflict that emerges, especially between Hamlet and Claudius. But Gertrude says, if it be, why seems it so particular with thee? Hamlet seizes on that word seems and exposes it for what it is, saying, Gertrude, you can dress up and get in front of the court with your new husband and pretend everything is hunky-dory, but you're pretending, you're lying. And that brings us to the end of his lines. Wearing black clothes or tearing up or sighing heavily, Hamlet says, these indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play. A man might pretend to be one way other than he is on the inside. But I have that within which path to show, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. He's saying his grief is authentic, and he's calling out Gertrude in a very public way for how quickly she has forgotten her former husband. This brings us to Hamlet's first soliloquy. Hamlet says, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. This introduces a motif that Hamlet will speak on multiple times. It's about life and death, in this case, suicide. His despair is such that he wishes he could die, except in this case, he says that it is God's law. It is a sin to do so, and that is all that stops him from doing so. As he moves on, he calls the world an unweeded garden. This is an allusion to, as we well know, Eden post-fall, where things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. Here, Hamlet is wallowing in the fallen state of man, for he has seen his mother, who we must presume he had some admiration for, behave in such a way that is perplexing, to say the least, to Hamlet. And she's betrayed him. Hamlet continues on, comparing his father with Claudius. This brings up images in his mind of how lovingly his mother acted towards his father. Perhaps a fondly remembered childhood memory, or maybe not childhood. But he ends most upset with the speed of the events. And it brings him to one of his most famous lines, "Frailty, thy name is woman." Now, from this line, Hamlet has frequently been charged, or occasionally been charged anyway, as being a misogynist. I think we should hold off on that. I think circumstances could justify him being upset that his mother did not hold firm, or at least wasn't true with him. He continues on, here really harping on his mother's shortcomings. As he continues, again, he harps on it's the speed of the events. And we must ask ourselves, why is the speed of the events so important? Now, clearly, we can say, well, it's poor form. It's bad taste to get married so soon after a husband has died. But the way he holds on to that and the language that he uses suggests that there is something much more at stake for Hamlet about the speed with which Gertrude married Claudius. But his mind does go to, well, he goes there, the sex life of his mom. And understandably, it kind of grosses him out